Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Where words come out from the depth of truth. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habits. Where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into the heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Namaskar. Welcome to another episode of Editorial. You know, this poetry written by Rabindranath Tagore is a very significant piece of my life. Very significant piece of my life. As a student, class 7th, we had this teacher. We used to call him Guruji. His name was Mr. Shete. He was not just our maths and physics teacher. He was actually our life coach. He was a guru to us. We would spend a lot of time with him, and there is one thing that he told me which I remember and I will remember till I die, and that is with reference to this poetry. You see, he used to tell us that this poetry that Rabindranath Tagore wrote was not just a poetry he wrote, it was a collective thought of all our founding fathers. It was the collective thought of Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Bhagat Singh, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. It was their collective thought, no matter what their ideologies were. But this was their dream. This was their dream for India, which Gurudev encapsulated in this poetry. And he used to tell me that every 15th of August, before you go for a flag hoisting, those days in school we had to go for flag hoisting. So he used to tell us, every 15th of August, before you go to flag hoisting, read this poetry and figure out where do we stand vis-a-vis the poetry. Where do we stand as a country vis-a-vis this poetry? You know what? I do it even today. Even this morning, the first thing when I got up was I read that poetry and tried to figure out where do we stand. Anyway, so that's my story. Let's get to the editorial. So let's talk about what our good Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, spoke in Red Fort this morning. He spoke for almost 1.5 hours, and I will give you a few points that he raised today. Let's get right into the show. Amidst a lot of security, amidst maintaining the social distancing and all of that, our good Prime Minister spoke for close to 1.5 hours. The first thing, of course, that he spoke was he praised the Corona warriors. And he said, the question before the entire world today is, when will the coronavirus vaccine be ready? As scientists, given their skills, has been like monks, single-mindedly working night and day in their labs. Because of this, not just 1 or 2, but 3 vaccines are now in various stages of development. As soon as we get the green flag, the roadmap has been prepared to start production on a very large scale. We will ensure that every Indian gets the vaccine in the shortest possible time. So this was the big announcement he made, that not just 1, but there were 3 vaccines getting ready, and it will be in your doorstep shortly. Whatever the timeline he didn't give, obviously, because ICMR, if you remember, long back had given 15th August as a timeline, and they had to retrack it. So I guess he didn't give a timeline this time. So, but all the same, he said it will happen very soon. The second important thing that our good Prime Minister spoke about was a unique health ID card. So one more card to our list. a unique health ID card which will actually consolidate our health data and our comorbidities and so on and so forth. It'll encapsulate all that, and it'll help us to get appointments with doctors. It will help the doctors to figure out what we are and how our health is, and also it will be some kind of a payment methodology. Obviously, the money we'll have to pay, but it will be a methodology. It will be easy to pay kind of a system. So that is something that he announced. That was his big announcement actually on the 74th Independence Day of India. The second point that he raised was about hinting about India-China standoff in Galwan. I say hinting because he never took China's name. But what he said was, with whatever happened, our Jawans replied in the language of the enemy. What the country and our Jawans can do was seen in Ladakh. I salute all those who laid down their lives to protect our own borders. So he paid his homage to the Jawans, and he said that, listen, we showed what our army can do. So that was what he said. But mind you, like I said before, I repeat, he never spoke about China. He also spoke about the idea of Vistaarvaad. Vistaarvaad is expansion. He also spoke about the idea of Vistaarvaad, and he said, those who are busy finding new places to put their flags and wanted to expand their empire underestimated us. The world saw 2 world wars, and so many nations faced immense destruction. But we rose through it all, and our freedom struggle was seen and acknowledged globally. Again, he spoke about China here, as in China coming and trying to take over Galwan Valley. He spoke about that here, but without naming China. But he said, listen, you know what? Do not dare, because we know how to answer you back. So that was another very significant thing that he spoke about. The third point that he spoke about was about farmers and how well our farmers have done. He said our farmers have made us Atma Nirbhar, from at one point importing food to now being self-sufficient, not only self-sufficient, even enough to export. So he praised our farmers here. He also spoke about discouraging imports. He said we should discourage imports because that is going to have serious hits on our economy. He said we should try and we should be self-reliant. Not only that, he said we should try and export as much as possible. That will be good for us. The Prime Minister spoke about FDIs increasing by 18% last year. So he said that has been all-time best as far as FDIs are concerned, foreign direct investment is concerned. He said we had an 18% growth in our FDIs last year. The Prime Minister also spoke about some important decisions, especially the national education policy, which has been relooked at and which has been presented after 3 decades. So he was talking about his achievements there. He also spoke about the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. He said that Dalits and women were provided equal rights because of the abrogation of the article, and he also said that in a matter of time the process of delimitation will start, and after that he said we can expect an election happening. He spoke about Ladakh being created into a carbon neutral union territory, the first possible carbon neutral union territory in the country. So broadly this is what Mr. Narendra Modi spoke about. A few things we were hoping to hear from our good Prime Minister, and the first thing was, how are we going to bounce back after COVID? How is the economy going to bounce back after COVID? How are the employments going to be generated after COVID? What happens to all those people who lost their employment? What happens to all those migrant workers who are currently in their respective villages? How are they going to be re-employed? This is something we were hoping to learn from him. The second thing I was actually hoping to learn from him is a slightly more detailed explanation of what Atma Nirbhar is. He spoke about local, vocal and all of that last time, but all that obviously I'm sure he also realized is not going to get you Atma Nirbhar. So what were his plans, concrete plans of how are we going to be Atma Nirbhar? Is there a vision? Is there a roadmap for that? That was something that I was hoping to hear from him. The third thing that I was hoping to hear from him is, while he spoke about our neighbors not just being our next door neighbors, our neighbors being anybody and everybody who is having good relations with us, which is a very good thought, but I wanted to know what happens to our next door neighbors. How are we planning to improve our relations with Nepal? How are we planning to improve our relationships with Bangladesh, with Sri Lanka, and possibly even China and Pakistan? How are we planning to improve our relationship? I thought he would throw some light on that. I was actually hoping to find out in a little more detail as to how is he planning delimitation in Jammu and Kashmir? How is he planning to get that region back to normalcy? I was hoping to hear that from him. But all the same, he spoke for 1.5 hours, and whatever he said, I shared it with you. Most of the things I shared it with you. A lot of things I did, but most of the things which I thought was important, I shared it with you. And I'm hoping that I will get these answers very soon from possibly one of his Mann Ki Baats or one of his speeches. But I'm looking forward for these answers. Till we meet next time. Namaskar.